Okay, so my final presentation is on the Toyota accidental acceleration cases from 2009 to 2011. So just a quick background. So in 2003 was actually when the first complaint was filed. In 2004, several complaints started coming in for unintended acceleration at low speeds for the 2002-2003 Camry. The Office of Defect Investigation under the NHTSA carried out an investigation. So at this point, they did suspect possible failure of the electronic throttle control system, which had just recently been put into Toyotas. And basically the ETC system is just a drive-by-wire system. So instead of mechanical systems being used for just car function, it's going to use electronic systems instead. So they did this for the Camry and also for the Lexus ES300 for the same years. They ended up just determining that it was driver error that caused all the unintended acceleration, so the investigations were closed. In 2007, complaints report unintended acceleration at high speeds. This was attributed to unsecured all-weather floor mats. So Toyota did release a recall on the mats in Camrys and ES350 cars. On August 28, 2009 in San Diego, California, this was kind of the turning point. There was a Lexus ES350 sedan that reached over 100 miles per hour, and it was headed towards an intersection, unfortunately, and it killed all 4 members of the family that were inside the car. So because of this, Toyota issued more widespread recalls on the mats. They didn't really take any further action. Later in the year, brake override systems were added to recall per recommendation of the NHTSA. In 2010, there was a recall that was issued for brakes themselves, and this was to address complaints of sticky brakes that were unrelated to the floor mats. But at this point, 9.2 million Toyotas had been recalled. So that was definitely kind of the action of choice in this case. In 2011, NASA and the NHTSA finally did conduct an investigation of the ETC system. Once again, even though petitions had been made in 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2009 to do so, all of them had been denied up until this point, but they did come to the conclusion that Toyota's problems were mechanical and not electrical. So because all of these mechanical issues had been addressed with recalls, they decided that no further action was needed, even though complaints were still rolling in. In 2013, a jury decided that investigations were incomplete, and unintended acceleration could have been connected to ETC system failure, since cosmic rays actually had the ability to cause a bit flip. Also, the runtime stack of the real-time operating system was not large enough to prevent the overriding of data that could result in possible unintended acceleration. So that was another factor. Both of these things were impossible to prove with 100% certainty. But basically, Toyota had information that they just didn't share, or they didn't share enough information that they did have with the public, just about what could possibly happen safety-wise. So they responded by paying $1.2 billion in settlements. They responded pretty quickly. They made managerial changes. They improved and mandated brake override systems on all the vehicles. And once again, the 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2009 petitions were made for further examination of the ETC systems, but those were all denied by the NHTSA. Okay, so what was the design flaw? So we don't really know for sure if it was the ETC system or the mechanical issues. There's actually a lot of kind of, I guess it'd be trials that are still pending against Toyota. So nothing has really been determined yet. There are some factors though that I feel like make the ETC system seem like the most probable design flaw in this case. So first of all, complaints of unintended acceleration became widespread when the ETC system came about in 2001. So before then, there really hadn't been any complaints. But as soon as that ETC system was implemented, then people started complaining about unintended acceleration. The NHTSA denied petitions to investigate the ETC system for consecutive years because recalls existed for the mechanical issues, even though the complaints didn't slow down. So they never said that, maybe mechanical issues aren't the root problem, maybe something else is going on here. They just kept saying, nope, like, recalls exist for the mechanical issues, but obviously the recalls weren't doing anything, or else the complaints would have stopped. But once they actually did investigate in 2013, they stayed saying that user error formats and sticky brake pads and mechanical issues were the only issues, and since recalls were in place, no need for further action was deemed necessary. So Toyota was also very quick to settle, which I think is a little suspicious. So the ethical issues, who's to blame? I think in this case, and with so many others, the engineers are the ones to blame, because they are the ones with the knowledge, and knowledge is power. So even though the engineers aren't necessarily the decision makers, especially in big corporations like Toyota and NASA and the NHTSA, I'm doing that wrong, but definitely the engineers are the ones who have all the information. These big corporations are relying on the engineers to relay their information that they do have, that they've been trained to relay, and so if they're not doing that, then anything that happens as a result of that is, I believe, their fault. So what led them to make these decisions? I said ethical egoism. They were probably concerned for their job safety, getting approval of coworkers and higher ups, monetary opportunity in the form of promotions. There's the possibility that they could be being paid off to say things and make Toyota look better, or make it so that Toyota doesn't have to pay as much, which I want to reinforce that money doesn't seem like it was the issue because of the $1.2 billion in settlements that Toyota ended up paying, and they paid it rather quickly. But I think it's more the mindset of we won't until it's absolutely necessary. And I just said that that's good for saving resources, but it's not good for saving lives, because when lives are at stake and there is the chance that something bad could happen and somebody could lose their life, you can't just maintain that mentality, because you have to prioritize human life. That is what I said here in moral lesson. So recalls were definitely a step in the right direction, but obviously as complaints were persisting, the real issues weren't being addressed. So engineers could have and should have spoken up at this point. I said that rights ethics should be prioritized over ethical egoism. Rights ethics places respect for the dignity and worth of individuals, according to Martin and Schinzinger. Oh my goodness. Martin and Schinzinger also say that the responsibility of engineers is autonomous personal involvement in all steps of a project and a constant awareness of the experimental nature of any project, imaginative forecasting of its possible side effects, and a reasonable effort to monitor them. They didn't do this in any of the instances, I feel like, at all, and if every engineer prioritized rights ethics approach, it's unlikely they would face consequences from the corporations, because if everybody was doing it, then the corporations wouldn't just fire all of their engineers, because obviously they need their engineers. So that is my presentation. It's going to get a lot better. I apologize for that. I'm on 3 hours of sleep, but yeah, it'll be better.